Hello everyone, happy 150th birthday to Renova. My name is Mrs. Wilson. I am a teacher at Bucktail Middle Senior High School. I was born and raised in Renova. My maiden name is Patricia Staley and I married Keith Wilson from Tamarack. Together we raised 2 children. This year I was assigned to teach history through films. I was approached by Carrie Kepler to put something together for the students to present at the 150th celebration of Renova. We met as a group and decided what topics to cover. After some discussion, many topics were selected, including the military, businesses, hospitals and schools, fires and disasters. We have a fantastic artist who did every drawing that the students needed on their topics. I hope you enjoy our show.
Hello Renovo, my name is Richard Probst and I am a student at Bucktail Area High School. Our History Through Film class has been researching the history of Renovo and I have been looking into schools and hospitals. It sparked my interest because it was what kept the town going. The hospital would care for the wounded and the school would educate the young. Through my research, I have found out that there have been multiple schools and hospitals in various locations. Some of the early schools consisted of the North Side School that opened in late 1800s and the 14th Street School that was opened in 1873 and meant to house high school students. Another early school was the first parochial school that opened in 1911 and was known as St. Joe's. They would just whittle away at the grades until it closed in 1983. One of the better known schools was built in the summer of 1868 on 7th Street near the riverbank. It was a 2-story brick building with 4 rooms to hold classes and anything else they needed. An interesting thing was that at the time of the construction, it was the finest school in the county. They later dismantled the old 7th Street School with plans to build a new one. It was dismantled in 1915 and the new school opened in 1916 and operated until 1967. It was just recently torn down after sitting empty over the years. The reason it stopped operating as a school was that they built Bucktail Area High School that opened its doors in the fall of 1967. After 8 years of the new school's opening, they opened an elementary school across from the high school around 1975. Both schools are functioning at present. The hospital has been in 2 different locations and is still running today in its second location under a different name. It was first the Renovo Hospital and it was purchased in 1909 and opened in 1910 with hundreds of people in attendance. It stood where the Family Dollar currently stands and its parking lot. In 1956, the first edition was added on and it was followed by the second edition in 1957. They had a total of 52 beds afterwards. Over the years, the hospital helped the many who needed it. The Piper Aircraft Corp later donated 6 acres of land for the location of the new Bucktail Medical Center to be built on. Through a series of donations, the medical center succeeded its goal. The medical center is still there, helping the many who walk through the doors like the Renovo Hospital once did. Not only does the Bucktail Medical Center serve as a hospital, but it also houses our elderly and service other special needs. Its emergency rooms have saved many lives, stabilizing and transporting many to bigger facilities. Our hospitals and schools is the lifeline of this community. If we were to lose any of them, our community would be in dire straits. They are the very essence of our community.
Over the past few months, our History Through Films class has been exploring the history of Renovo. My focus has been on exploring old businesses. The first business that caught my eye was the service garage. As I looked over the history, I noticed that it housed many owners. There were various car dealerships selling Ford, Pontiac, Dodge, Buick, and Studebaker. As of 1975, it became a family-owned business serving as a gas station and a car repair shop. The next business I found interest in was the former YMCA. The YMCA offered a variety of activities including basketball, tennis, bowling, and swimming. It was once a prime location for the railroaders traveling from Harrisburg to Buffalo. Over time, fewer and fewer railroaders made use of the facility. Pete Kingsley later bought it. He opened the restaurant and hotel called the Kingsley Inn. It is now a family-owned restaurant called Yesterday's. I also found interest in the business A&P. The A&P was opened in 1926. The manager was Clarence Berry on 8th Street, where the current Big Louie's is located. The building was once a wallpaper and paint store. In 1970, the A&P was moved to 15th Street to the present-day Lingles. Another business I found interest in was Janopolis' restaurant. To many people in Renova, it was a place to be after church on Sunday. It was also the place for the best hot dogs. Community members I spoke with had many fond memories of Janopolis'. Most family gatherings were held there. When they closed their doors, it was a huge loss to the community. The last business I researched was the Rialto Theater. Not only was the Rialto Theater used for showing movies, it was also a place for live performances. Many who graduated from the Renova area remember seeing a movie here for a part of their graduation tradition.
Hello everyone, my name is Brooke Kepler and I am the daughter of Josh and Carrie Kepler. I am a junior firefighter for the Renovo Fire Department. My topic for this iMovie was to talk about the disasters in the community of Renovo. The area that interests me most was fires, especially coming from a firefighter-oriented background. One of the main fires that interested me most was the fire of 1876. On the night of December 8th, 1876, around midnight, one of the most disastrous fires in Renovo history had occurred. This incident occurred during a heavy snowstorm. The fire started at Oddfellow Hall on the corner of 6th Street and St. Clair Avenue. Due to heavy winds and the closeness surrounding buildings, the fire spread to other structures. The firemen worked diligently to control the fire, but yet finally, after 3 hours, they had managed to control it. The Crowley, the McCone houses, Stevenson's warehouse, the Oddfellow Hall, and the P&R Company's double house were completely destroyed. Within these buildings, losses were estimated between $15,000 and $20,000. By today's standards, that's really not a lot of money, but back then it was. The cause of the fire was unknown. Someone said they had seen a man running from the Crowley house just a few minutes before the fire alarm was sounded. Another area that caught my attention was the number of lumbering accidents. One of the stories that interested me was the story of Martin Mayers. In April of 1883, Martin was killed. He was crushed beneath logs as timber slid down the hill onto the riverbank on Young Woman Creek. Just years before this, around the same time, Jeremiah Bartow was in a log jam accident on Cook's Run. Moments before his death, he managed to save two men who were already caught in the jam. Coming from a firefighter's background, I can only imagine how busy the emergency service was. These are two examples of how dangerous lumbering was. On the other note, the last topic I would like to discuss is the major flood of 1936. On Tuesday, March 17th, at 6 a.m., the Susquehanna rivers overflew its banks. Heavy rains caused this flood. It reached the height of 29.36 feet higher than the flood of 1889. The town was underwater. Many residents were displaced from their homes. Most of the damage occurred when the current of the river moved. Traveling in and out of Renovo was impossible. Water washed out railroad tracks and some of the bridges. Renovo was just isolated. The Red Cross did as much as they possibly could. They donated medication, food, radio equipment, anything that you can think of. The floodwaters began to go down on March 18th. Renovo's history is full of many fires, tragedies, and natural disasters. To fully understand the many occurrences in Renovo, you would have to take a course in that history alone. These are only a few that caught my attention. By modern standards, I'd like to think that education and technology has improved our response to emergencies, saving more structures and lives, as well as monitoring the Susquehanna River when Mother Nature is unkind. We have come a long way. Personally, I am proud of our fire company and proud to be a junior member of the Renovo Fire Company.
Happy birthday, Renovo! My name is Amanda Tyrell. I'm a student at Bucktail High School. My contribution to this presentation focuses on military personnel that have lived in the community and their stories of service. George Fantasky quit high school at St. Joe's to join the Navy. He fought in the European Theater and Pacific Theater. George participated in the cleanup after the invasion of Normandy. He and his other soldiers took equipment and loads of anything they could use to their advantage. He boarded a ship to Massachusetts, went across the ocean to North Africa, and then to southern France for a year. He then came back to the U.S. and went to New York on a 30-day leave. Sometime after his leave, he ended up going through the Panama Canal on a U.S. General Butler with 5,000 troops that were sent back to the state and were discharged. His favorite memory while serving was his nickname, Great Fantasky. He always liked to say, "I've been around the world, but never in the air." Staff Sergeant Frank J. DePoulos was killed in action at age 22, December 7, 1941, at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, in Hickam Field. At age 20, on June 4, 1939, DePoulos joined the Army Air Corps. He had graduated from St. Joe's High School and was at the time employed at the Rialto Theater as an usher. Before sailing to Hawaii, Frankie was stationed at Fort Slocum, New York. While in Hawaii, he sent his last letter home and told of being crew chief on a bomber. Frank was attached to the 46th Pursuit Squadron and was a crew chief on the same bomber he had previously written home about. He had served 2.5 years, and his enlistment was due to expire the June following his death. Frank J. DePoulos was the first and only casualty from Renovo. A National Defense at Mass meeting was held at the Renovo High School in his memory. Francis Lovett served in the Army, Navy, and Air Force. He joined the service at 17, leaving school. At first, they realized he lied about his age, and he was removed from his position. A week later, he enlisted again. His inspiration to enlist was because the friends he grew up with were all being drafted. Lovett was a flight engineer. Most of his experience were aircraft in formation over enemy territory throughout all of the branches he served in. After missions, his fellow soldiers came back covered in blood. Sometimes they would be allowed a pass to go to shore until they ship out again. This is called liberty. However, if they were stationed in enemy territory, they were not allowed to get off the ship. Although Mr. Lovett was normally talkative in his past years, he said, "Fear made me quiet during my service." Herbert Nesbitt served 4 years in the Air Force during the Korean War. He lost most of his hearing during that war. He went to school for flight engineering to fly B-29 planes, but also flew B-25 and B-26 planes. Some of Herbie's contribution was to haul whiskey from Panama to the States. Betty Jane Hagan joined the U.S. Naval Reserves in the medical field during World War II. Women in the Navy military were called waves. To be able to fulfill her duty, she studied nursing at Jefferson Medical School in Philadelphia. Afterwards, she continued training at the Bethesda Naval Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. She worked at the Philadelphia Naval Hospital. She was released from service because she was the last offspring of her family. Betty was able to return home and mourn the loss of her brother. After being released, she continued to assist with the war effort by becoming a Rosie the Riveter at the PA Railroad shops for the remainder of the war. William Edward Hagan was too young at the time to enlist in World War II. At the time, he was age 15, so he had a commendable and prominent member of the community to lie about his age so he could enlist. He became a seaman on the USS Hornet, a famous aircraft carrier. This carrier had engaged in major battles in the Pacific Ocean. He was tragically lost at sea when an injured pilot tried to land a plane and swept the deck, throwing him overboard. His body was never found. Lawrence E. Packer served in the U.S. Army in World War II and the Korean War. Larry joined the Army at 15. He had lied about his age to get into the military. During World War II, he served under General Patton. He and his unit were some of the first to wear the Eisenhower jackets. Later, Larry was chosen as one of the guards in the Nuremberg trials. He had spoken to many of the Nazis who wanted to genocide mankind. In the Korean War, he was part of the 2nd ID 38th Infantry Company B unit. He was bayoneted through the neck and survived. He was also struck by a missile and recovered. After learning how to walk again, he was back on the front lines. On February 12, 1951, Packer was captured as a POW. That battle area was called Massacre Valley, where thousands of U.S. troops were killed. After several days, Lawrence escaped from captivity by trading a gold watch to a Korean woman to leave the cages unlocked for him and 5 other unfamiliar prisoners of war. Along with them was one Korean interpreter from his unit known as Jap. Eventually, Larry found his way back to his unit and put on the front lines soon after. Later, he had been recommended by thousands of men in his battalion to be a bodyguard for General Ridgway. However, after some time, General Ridgway was replaced by General Von Fleeten, whom he also served for. John Curcio served in the Air Force, drafted at age 18. World War II broke out as he was a junior in high school. In the beginning of his service, Curcio worked at an air base in Delaware. After 2 years of service, he was released at age 20. At that time, he went back to school and got his diploma. Johnny flew B-24 bomber planes, the most built plane during World War II. After each mission, soldiers took 2 shots of whiskey and were interrogated about everything they had seen and happened. One time, a German jet almost hit the U.S.'s formation ME-262 jet. Enemy buzz bombers dropped bombs and destroyed an entire block just 2 blocks away from him and his crew. On Christmas Eve, Johnny and his crew flew nose turrets to bomb in the Battle of the Bulge. Those who flew planes were called flyboys. After basic training, John Curcio received a stripe on his uniform. After about 35 missions, he got a certificate. First in Georgia, then in Italy, he and his crew members had moving target practice. Not many people are aware of this, but Japanese released blue bombs and eventually got them to land in California to cause fire.
So the final task was coming up with a name for our little video. We decided it should be a walk down memory lane, and one of my students came up with that title. So I decided it would be neat to take a walk down memory lane, and I met my students at the 16th Street Park, and we decided to walk around town with some of my students and a grandmother and a friend, and we had a beautiful day. We ate lunch at yesterday's, which used to be the old YMCA, and we continued our walk down Erie Avenue and covered all three avenues, as a matter of fact. We covered Ontario, Huron, and Erie Avenue, and then we made our way to South Renova to where Pinky's used to be. And Lisa's is now the establishment there, and we had our famous peanut butter fudge sundaes. The sundaes used to be made by Dolly Preble, but this time, some years past, Lisa was the one that put our sundaes together. And I had a beautiful day with a bunch of really nice kids.